The Kidhar High Council chamber shimmered like polished obsidian, walls alive with veins of pale light that pulsed the rhythm of alien heartbeats. The assembled dignitaries did not look at Earth with fear or even respect. They looked with amusement, as though studying a child's drawing on a wall. Something to mock but never to take seriously. A towering Kidhar delegate, his skin patterned in geometric scales, raised a clawed hand and spoke in that clipped, mechanical tone his species favored. Humans cling to their relics. Their oldest weapon lies beneath their own frozen wasteland, rusting in ignorance, a symbol of futility, a myth wrapped in ice. The chamber erupted in cold laughter. Across the chamber's edge, Captain Elias Vane kept his jaw locked tight, though his knuckles whitened where he gripped the rail. He had long since learned that silence was safer than defiance, especially in a galaxy where Earth's sovereignty was tolerated, not respected. Still, the sting burned. He remembered men who had bled on mud-drenched fields, women who had held shattered lines with grit alone, and he knew those ghosts were not laughing. When the delegate's words echoed one last time, "Harmless," Elias exhaled slowly, a hiss of contempt that passed for calm. Later, he found himself staring out the viewport of the council vessel, watching her shrink into a blue and white marble. Home looked fragile from up here, a planet clinging to dignity, the way a drowning man clings to driftwood. Behind him came the soft pad of footsteps. "You didn't punch him," Lyra Kale observed dryly. "That's progress." She was younger than Elias by a decade, sharp-eyed, her hair tucked into a utilitarian braid. Officially, she was a xenolinguist assigned as cultural liaison. Unofficially, she was one of the few people who could needle Elias without earning a growl in response. He shot her a weary glance. "I considered it, but I didn't pack my bail money." Her smirk was quicksilver. "That's the spirit. Keep disappointing them. They'll never know what to do with you." Her tone was joking, but there was steel beneath it, the same frustration he carried. The knowledge that humanity was underestimated not by chance, but by design. 2 weeks later, he stood in Antarctica, his boots crunching over cracked ice. Wind howled like some ancient beast across the barren expanse. Above, green auroras coiled in the sky, a reminder that beauty and danger often wore the same mask. Lyra hunched against the coal beside him, muttering curses into her scarf. "You know, when I signed up for off-world assignments, I imagined sunsets on Mars, not frostbite at the bottom of the planet." Elias said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the fissure yawning before them, jagged and black against the pale expanse. He had received a message a month ago, anonymous, untraceable. "The ice is breaking. Bring fire." At first, he dismissed it as a hoax. Then came the satellite images, shifts in the shelf. Heat blooms where there should be none. Now he was here, and part of him wished he had ignored the call. The ground trembled beneath them, subtle at first, then building into a groan that vibrated through his bones. Lyra stumbled, clutching his arm. From the fissure came a noise, not wind, not cracking ice, but the grinding of metal against stone, a resonance so deep it seemed to claw its way up the spine of the earth. Elias froze, every instinct telling him to run, every memory screaming recognition. The fissure split wider with a deafening crack. Ice chunks cascaded into the abyss. Then, impossibly, something rose. It was not sleek, not modern. Its bulk was angular, riveted steel scarred with time. 6 mechanical limbs gouged into ice for purchase. Barrels bristled along its spine, twin rotary cannons that groaned as they flexed, ancient yet unyielding. Steam hissed from vents, mingling with the frozen air in a ghostly shroud. And then it moved forward, crawling out of the ice like a predator waking from hibernation. Lyra's voice shook. "Tell me I'm hallucinating." Elias swallowed hard. His chest felt tight, his throat raw. "You're not." The machine planted itself on solid ice, each limb sinking deep as though the earth itself welcomed it. Symbols etched along its armored flank caught the aurora's light. Faded insignias of wars long gone, fragments of human language carved like prayers into its shell. It turned its head, or what passed for one, toward the Kidhar drones hovering nearby. The drones unleashed a hail of plasma fire. The blast struck the machine's armor, searing bright scars, but it did not fall. Instead, the cannons whirred, coughed once, then spun into a roar that thundered across the tundra. Tracer rounds streaked red against green sky. The drones detonated like fragile ornaments. Lyra flinched, pressing closer to Elias. That thing's alive. He shook his head slowly. Not alive, just built to remember. Then the impossible happened. The machine shifted, its cannons lowering. Its torso swiveled until its battered hull faced Elias directly. A groan of servos filled the silence. Then, slowly, deliberately, it bent, lowering its massive frame as though bowing. Lyra gasped. Elias could only stare, the aurora burning across his reflection in its steel hide. A relic buried for centuries had awakened, not for aliens, not for conquest, but for them. The ground shuddered again. More drones swarmed on the horizon, dozens, then hundreds, a tide of mechanical locusts sent by the Kithar blockade. Their laughter from the council echoed in Elias's mind, the word harmless slicing through memory. He felt something inside him shift, a weight lifted, another set down. The ice wind stung his face, but beneath it burned an ember he thought long dead. Defiance. He raised his voice, raw but steady. You wanted to see our relic? You wanted proof we were finished? Watch closely. The machine's cannon spun up again, a storm ready to break. Lyra's hand found his without words, her grip fierce. Above them, the aurora writhed like a living flame. The first volley lit the night. And if you listen closely, if you hold your breath long enough, you will hear the truth buried in the roar. Humanity's silence is never surrender. The ice does not kill fire. It shelters it, waiting for the day the world needs it again. And when it rises, as it always does, it reminds us all, we do not kneel, we do not break, we survive. The horizon burned with engines. A swarm of Kithar carriers descended to the polar night, their silhouettes cutting across the aurora, blotting green light with shadows of war. The air vibrated with the hum of their plasma cores. Elias stood rigid, watching them descend like vultures that had finally scented blood. The relic crouched beside him, its cannons steaming, metal frames shuddering with every movement as though waking hurt after centuries of sleep. Lyra clutched her tablet against her chest, her face pale, breath fogging in the cold. They're coming in waves. If the blockade shifts groundside, this won't stay secret for long. Elias's gaze hardened. It's not a secret anymore. They'll broadcast this, parade us as fools. Unless, he stopped, the weight of his thought grinding his jaw shut. Unless what? She pressed. He turned to face her, eyes shadowed by the aurora's green light. Unless we stop them here. Now. Lyra blinked, then laughed once, sharp, incredulous. Do you hear yourself? You're talking about holding Antarctica with one ancient death machine, a linguist, and a soldier who can't even afford a working coffee pot. Elias didn't smile. His silence was answer enough. The carriers opened, raining drones by the hundreds, spidery constructs with plasma eyes that glowed like shards of a false sun. The relic shifted, 6 limbs anchoring deep into the ice. Its barrels whirred, then thundered. The first wave exploded midair, raining fragments that hissed as they melted through snow. Elias ducked instinctively, but Lyra stayed upright, transfixed, her hair whipped wild by the shock waves. It's learning, she whispered. It's not just firing randomly. It's calculating their trajectories. Elias glanced at her. How do you know? Because it's compensating for wind shear. She jabbed her tablet toward the sky. Look, every correction matches the atmospheric data. It's fighting like it remembers physics better than we do. Another wave pressed down, heavier, brighter, a choking storm of plasma bolts. The relic staggered under barrage. Armor peeled, joints groaned, steam hissed in thick bursts. Still, it refused to fall. It reared back, cannons glowing white-hot, then released a wall of fire that carved through the swarm like a scythe. Elias tasted blood where he'd bitten his lip. Stubborn thing. Lyra looked at him sidelong. You sound almost proud. Maybe I am. His voice dropped. It's more human than most of us. The Kithar commander's voice crackled through the freezing air, amplified by the swarm's relay network. Humans, stand down. Return to your shelters. This is containment, not conquest. The artifact belongs to the council. Elias spat into the snow. Containment is just conquest with better branding. He raised his rifle, though it felt laughable compared to the storm above. Still, the gesture mattered. Lyra reached out, stopping his arm. You can't fight them that way. But maybe you can fight them another way. He turned, impatient. Meaning? She hesitated, then held up her tablet. If I can tap into its frequency, whatever link this relic uses to respond to us, I might be able to amplify it, direct it. Right now, it's fighting on instinct. But with guidance. Elias stared at her. You want to talk to it? Her jaw tightened. No, I wanted to listen. Another explosion shook the ground. The relic staggered forward, catching itself on its claws. Its cannons flickered, barrels nearly seizing. Lyra dropped to her knees in the snow, connecting wires, her hands trembling not from cold but urgency. Elias covered her with his rifle, every shot feeling futile, but fired anyway. Seconds dragged like years. Drones fell closer, hissing as they struck the ice. Then her screen flashed. A pulse resonated through the air, faint but deep, like the heartbeat of some mechanical leviathan. The relic paused, turned. Its cannons swiveled not blindly, but deliberately, locking to the rhythm of her commands. Lyra gasped. It's listening. The swarm pressed closer, a tidal wave of metallic shrieks. Elias shouted over the storm. Then make it count. She tapped frantically, her breath coming in bursts. The relic responded, shifting angles, cutting through drones before they could flank. It moved with unnatural precision now, not just surviving, but strategizing. The Kithar commander's voice returned, sharper, colder. Unacceptable. Terminate the humans. Take the machine intact. Carriers dipped lower, unleashing heavier units. Massive walkers that crashed through the ice like armored beasts. Plasma cannons ignited, spewing torrents that lit the tundra in blinding light. The relic screamed, a grinding roar of servos, before charging forward on all 6 limbs, tearing into the walkers with fury that shook the earth. Its cannons chewed through armor, its claws raked glowing scars into metal holes. Elias ran with it, rifle spitting fire though it barely scratched the enemy. Still, he ran because standing still was death. Lyra followed, breath ragged, clutching her tablet like it was her soul. Together, the 3 of them, man, woman, machine, threw themselves against a wall of fire meant to erase them from history. The battle blurred into chaos. Shards of molten steel, ice shattering underfoot, the stink of ozone. Elias's ears rang with every explosion. Lyra's voice cut through, urgent, desperate. It's burning out. The cannons won't hold. Elias turned just in time to see the relic stagger, one limb snapping under the strain, sparks bursting from its joints. Still it fought, dragging itself forward, cannon spitting flame though the barrels glowed molten red. The Kithar flagship descended at last, a leviathan blotting out the aurora, its hull bristling with guns. Its shadow swallowed them whole. Elias felt the weight of it press into his chest, the certainty that this was the end. Then the relic reared back, all cannons blazing, every vent shrieking steam. It fired not in bursts, but in a single sustained roar, a storm of metal tearing into the flagship's hull. Armor cracked. Engines screamed. A plume of fire split the night. The Leviathan shuddered, listing as its guns fell silent one by one. The flagship descended, not as a conqueror, but as a dying beast, crashing into the ocean with thunder that split the ice shelf for miles. The impact sent waves racing under their feet. The drones faltered, their network severed. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of steam rising from the relic's shattered frame. Elias fell to one knee, chest heaving, lungs burning with cold air and smoke. Lyra collapsed beside him, tablet sparking, her hands blistered from the heat of overworked circuits. They looked up together at the relic, its frame broken, half buried in snow, yet still upright. It had fought until nothing remained to give. Elias whispered hoarsely, almost reverently, "It remembered us." And in that moment, if you had stood there on the broken ice, you would have understood the truth buried under centuries of silence. Strength is not measured in power or precision, but in the will to endure when all else breaks. Humanity's relic fought not because it was commanded, but because it chose to. And perhaps, so must we. Smoke drifted across the fractured ice like torn banners after battle. The aurora above still burned, but its beauty felt unreal against the ruin below. The relic stood silent, its frame cracked and glowing faintly in the cold, steam rising from wounds that would never heal. Elias leaned heavily on his rifle, chest heaving, staring at the machine that had fought harder than anything alive. Beside him, Lyra's face was ghostly pale, streaked with soot and exhaustion. Her tablet lay shattered in the snow, sparks fizzing out in pathetic bursts. She looked at the wreckage of the Kithar flagship burning on the horizon, then at Elias. Her voice was hoarse. "We should be dead. All of us." Elias managed a dry laugh, though it tasted like blood. "That's what they always think. That's the joke." She didn't smile. She was too busy watching the relic. Its cannons drooped, its limbs half buried, yet remained upright as though refusing to die in the presence of enemies. Then, with a grinding whine, a panel on its chest shifted, metal plates sliding apart to reveal a core pulsing faint light. A fragment of heat, a heart made of circuitry and memory. Elias staggered forward, drawn by it. The relic's core detached with a heavy clunk, cables tearing free like veins. It fell into the snow at his feet, glowing faintly against the white. Elias knelt, hands trembling as he lifted it. The heat radiated into his skin, not burning but pulsing like a heartbeat. Lyra whispered, awed and terrified all at once. "Why would it give that to you?" Elias swallowed hard. "Because it's finished. And I'm not." Overhead, comms crackled to life. The Kithar commander's voice returned, ragged with fury. "You think this changes anything? You think one relic can alter the Council's will? Humanity will kneel." Elias rose, the core heavy in his arms, the aurora painting his face in shifting fire. "We've kneeled enough," he growled. "And look where it's gotten us." The relic shuddered one last time. Then it collapsed, finally silent. For a long moment, there was nothing but the hiss of cooling metal and the faint whistle of the wind. But silence never lasted in war. From the east, more carriers appeared, smaller this time but numerous, streaking low across the sky. Reinforcements. Elias knew the relic had given everything to bring down the flagship. There was no miracle left to save them now. His hands tightened on the core. Lyra grabbed his arm. "We can't fight another wave. Not like this." Elias looked at her, truly looked at her. The dirt smeared across her cheek, the fire in her eyes that defied despair. "No," he admitted quietly. "But maybe we can make them remember." He pressed the core into the harness on his armor. It fused instantly, tendrils of light wrapping around his frame, threads of memory searing into him. He gasped, knees buckling as visions flooded his mind. Trenches filled with mud and smoke, soldiers shouting, the rattle of gunfire, the weight of sacrifice, voices layered over one another, centuries of warriors speaking as one. "We do not kneel. We do not break. We survive." When he lifted his head, his eyes burned brighter than the aurora. Lyra stepped back, stunned. "Elias, what did it do to you?" He exhaled slowly. "It remembered me, and now I remember all of them." The carriers descended, shadows growing longer. Elias raised his rifle. It felt different in his hands now, lighter, steadier, like an extension of something far older than himself. He turned to Lyra. "You wanted a weapon that listens. Now you got one." The first wave hit, drones spilling like locusts across the ice. Elias moved before thought, his body guided by instincts not his own. His shots landed perfect, each burst cutting the swarm apart. Plasma bolts ricocheted past, but he wove between them, movements impossibly precise, as though ghosts were guiding his every step. Lyra scrambled to cover him, salvaging a broken rifle from the ground, firing desperately. But she couldn't take her eyes off him. He was different, not possessed, not gone, but amplified, carrying more than just his own will. 1,000 hands steadied him. 1,000 voices roared through him. The Kithar commander's voice turned panicked. "Impossible. This is not possible." Elias shouted back, voice carried across the battlefield by wind and fire. "That's what you always say, until it's too late." He tore through the drones, every movement efficient, brutal, relentless. The carriers tried to retreat, their engines flaring, but Elias pressed forward. Each shot a promise that humanity was not done. One carrier erupted in flames, then another. The sky became a graveyard of falling steel. Finally, the last drone dropped, smoking into the snow. Silence returned, broken only by Elias's ragged breathing. He lowered his rifle slowly, shoulders trembling. The glow in his armor dimmed, but the ember remained. Lyra approached carefully, touching his arm. "Are you still you?" He met her gaze, tired but unbroken. "I'm me, just more of me than I was yesterday." She searched his face, then nodded once. "Then let's make sure this story spreads. Let's make sure they all know what crawled out of the ice." Above, the aurora shifted, streaks of red weaving through green like blood in water. The battlefield smoldered. The relic lay shattered, but its heart beat on in Elias's chest. He looked toward the horizon, where the dark void of space waited. Somewhere out there, the Council would already be recalculating, already deciding how best contain Earth, to erase this humiliation. He felt the weight of it pressing down, but for the first time in years, he didn't bow under it. Instead, he straightened. The wind howled across the ice. His voice rose against it, steady and defiant. "Let them come again. Let them laugh. We'll remind them every time until the galaxy understands. We don't survive because we're strong. We survive because we refuse to stop. And if you take nothing else from this frozen night, if you forget the machines and the battles and the fire and the sky, remember this. Even when buried beneath centuries of silence, even when mocked, dismissed, and chained by doubt, humanity's fire does not die. It waits. It endures. And when the ice finally breaks, when the storm comes, that fire crawls out again. It crawls out burning. It crawls out alive. And it carries us all forward.